This evening for a special interview with ex-Loyalist prisoner, Loyalist combatant Jim Wilson. He's a member of the Loyalist Communities Council. He was a Loyalist negotiator at the time of the Belfast Agreement, and we're posing the question in this series and in these discussions of, did Loyalists get it wrong in 1998? So Jim, you're very welcome. I am a Loyalist who is of the new generation, obviously not your generation, and I think he's got it wrong in 1998. What do you say about that?
Well, Jamie, to be honest with you, the way this country was going and what was happening in this country, I think all those within Loyalism who had been involved in the conflict, as anyone would have been, was fed up and sick, sore and tired of the killings, the bombings and the murders. And when it came up, the Good Friday Agreement, the likes of David Irvine, Brian McMichael and Billy Hutchison and others who led the Progressive Unionist Party's stance into the Good Friday Agreement with Loyalism, which was Loyalism. The three main groups were all behind it, and we were all behind it, I think, for all the same reasons. We wanted to see our children and the children of this country having a better future. It was a chance that came our way. We looked at all the ins and outs of it. I think the most important thing to the Loyalists at the time, and I know definitely when we sent word into the prison that the Union was safe, that was the question was being asked by our prisoners: is the Union safe? And we were told the Union is safe. And when we were told the Union was safe, then we proceeded to continue with the negotiations through the Good Friday Agreement. And that was the basis of the Good Friday Agreement, that the Union was safe. And personally, within 2 years of the Good Friday Agreement being signed, I done an interview in Victoria Park with the then journalist Mike Nesbitt, and I had told him that what I had seen since the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. The Good Friday Agreement was the road to it was painted green, white and gold for Republicans, because we were getting very, very little out of it. We were getting very, very little substance excuse me, in our own communities. Everything that Republicanism seemed to want, they got, and they became so angry to get all these bits and pieces coming to them and in their communities. And fair play to them, because at certain times, because our communities was not getting. So when you say, did we make the right decision? Nah, no, we didn't. But then, yes, we did. You know, and it's all right saying, well, you're changing your mind now, and you should have thought more then. But we weren't to, you know, we had to judge based on what Republicans and the governments were telling us, and we had to judge it on that. And I think the judgment that we made then was the right judgment. I done an own show a long while back, and I said that I still supported the Good Friday Agreement then because it had saved lives. It saved lives in this country. And David Irvine said it. It was a dirty, stinking war.
Do you still support the Belfast Agreement?
Do not indeed, no. And I haven't for a long while. I've seen a lot of things that were happening and had happened to our community, and there was far too much give from our politicians to Republicanism, and I've seen all that. And I haven't been outspoken in saying that I haven't supported it. I did support it because it saved lives. And when I've seen what has happened since then, I have turned against the Good Friday Agreement massively. And I was one of the ones who helped to lead delegations of the PUP to go against the DUP when they were sitting outside the tent. And we were at rallies and pushing for the Good Friday Agreement because of the fact that, you know, I didn't want any of my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren to go through a conflict again, which I had seen and which I had been involved in. It was stinking. It was dirty.
Do you think it would be fair then would this be a fair summary of what you're saying, that you accept in terms of how it's worked out? It was a mistake, but it was a mistake for the right reasons.
Oh, absolutely. You know, now where I sit in reference to the Good Friday Agreement, you know, I seen the work that the Irish government put in and like it or like it not, the Irish government, Bertie Ahern, Mary McAleese and Martin McAleese, who we had met and talked to, and they seemed to listen then when we were talking to them. We actually at one stage had probably more in tune with the Irish government than the British government. The British government weren't listening to us. They were more interested in what the Republicans were saying and doing. And the Irish government then came and became sort of friends to our people, and not there with the work that went on behind the scenes, Jamie. And you look at it now. What's the relationship now with the Irish government? There is none.
Do you think the Irish government now has completely demolished relationships?
They have run cart and horses right through it. And I feel so sorry for the people like Martin McAleese and Mary McAleese and Bertie Ahern, because the fact is that they did try. I know they tried because I was there. When the Loyalist Commission went down and met Bertie Ahern secretively years ago, we confronted him across the table. He told us he was an Irish Republican. We accepted that. And basically we had said to him, your country has made an enemy out of our people for what you've done in the conflict. You've harboured IRA men in this country for years and wouldn't send them back up. You supported them, and you need to turn and show the hand of friendship to the Unionist and Loyalist people. And for a long while they did, and for a long while it was accepted. And then we have what the Irish government has done in the last 2 or 3 years. We met Simon Coveney at least 3 or 4 times. We warned him not to go down this road. We told him that it's very, very dangerous territory they're dealing with when they're going to more or less put our people under pressure and put the border in the Irish Sea as opposed to on the island of Ireland, which we didn't want in any case anywhere. We wanted to try and get some mechanism where you didn't have to have an Irish border in the sea or an Irish border on the island of Ireland.
So, and obviously you're somebody who has over many years has a strong track record in terms of working to encourage young people not to go get drawn into violence and all of that. So I mean I think that's clear. Nobody could dispute that. But on the footing that you've said that presumably the Loyalist ceasefires, I mean it's in the CLMC statement, and support for the Belfast Agreement was based upon the fundamental basis that the Union was safe. So if a young Loyalist, a teenager comes to you today and says, well Jim, the Union's no longer safe. The Union is subjugated essentially, and therefore what is the basis for and a young person says, well, we want to do what the Republicans did in 1969, we feel we are now legitimately doing that. And of course that's not something you would support, but I mean in terms of how you would morally answer that question, how would you answer that question?
Well, morally I believe the Republican movement went to war for very, very, very little. If you look at the conflict in this country, and they constantly are out there all around the world saying that they were subjugated and all this stuff. There's nobody more subjugated than the black people of America. The black people of America did not go to war and plant bombs and kill left, right, and centre. And within a period of years, they had a black president. So work that out, Jimmy. They didn't have to do the things that they done. They didn't have to be violent about what they done. They done it in a different way, and they ended up, becoming a people who, and they're still under pressure with the policing and stuff like that goes on. But they're coming through that, and as the world evolves and people evolve, these things get put behind you. The racism, the sectarianism, and all that stuff. Young lads coming to me now, I would have to advise them that. Violence is not, violence can only attain something. I've said this time and time again, Republicans constantly use the threat of violence to get what they wanted. And the Irish government tuned into that and done that as well. What sort of society are we living in if that is the answer to get your own way? And what are we educating our children? To tell our children to go out and threaten violence or to be violent to attain something? That's not the message that's sent out to anybody. We are a peaceful people.
You, that message?
Yeah,
the young loyalists will say, well, I mean, the threat of violence is good enough to prevent a land border. Why should the threat of violence not be good enough to prevent
well, you see,
it's just a difficult situation.
Of course it is, but two rights don't make a wrong. We need leadership from our politicians. We need intelligence from the leaders of the British government. These people need to understand and realise that at the end of the day, we are part of the United Kingdom, and that's all we are asking to be. I want to be the same as a guy that lives in Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham or London. That's what as a British citizen, that's my right. That's my right not to be treated any different, and I'm being treated different. And it's not what I signed up for in the Good Friday Agreement. You know, in the Good Friday Agreement, you know, all these things were guaranteed to us through the Good Friday Agreement. And now that they've taken that away from me, I just have absolutely no time for the Good Friday Agreement whatsoever.
Yeah, and to go back then to a bit of your own history, obviously, tell us a wee bit about 1994, the CLMC. Obviously, you were involved in the Loyalist negotiations to bring about the ceasefire.
Well, it was in the back. On the backside of it, if you know what I mean, it wasn't right at the forefront, you know. What
was the thinking then? In
well, the thinking was that we, you know, Gusty Spence went to a conference with us one time, and Gusty said to me, Jim, he says, you have to sit down with people and look into their whites of their eyes and find out if they're being honest with you, and if they really want what you want. Now, we sat down with Republicans, and Republicans told us across the table that the war was over. We wanted them, and I got a bit concerned because they weren't coming out to actually say the war was over at the time, you know. But eventually they got to that stage where they said the war was over, and when they got to that stage, then it's one of these things you say, right, okay, but it's a different type of war, Jamie. They started another cultural war against us, which was part of what they had to do in republicanism, because they had factions that didn't go along with them. Most of loyalism, the biggest percentage of loyalism went with it. In the ranks of the three main loyalist groups, there was dissent, don't make no bones about that. There was people who, friends of mine who were connected to Ulster Volunteer Force, the UDA and the Red One, who had all more or less fell out with me because I wanted to move forward. That they didn't like the thought of us sitting down with Republicans at any stage or anywhere, because they were the enemy. But we had to surpass that, and we did surpass that.
Well, a difficult question perhaps on that, and obviously we take it that there's whenever somebody who didn't live through the worst of the Troubles, wasn't there in 1998, you know, it's legitimate for somebody like you to say, well, hang on, you weren't there, you didn't understand the context of the time and why we did what we did. But what about those people who did come through the conflict with you, and who in 1998 said, you're wrong, you know, don't do this, and people who of equal credentials and loyalist history? I mean, what would you say to them now? You know, somebody of your own age who did go through the conflict, would say, well, Jim, hang on, we told you this in 98,
but they didn't.
Took a different
Jimmy,
path.
but you see, they weren't basing this around. They weren't basing their rejection of the Good Friday Agreement based on anything other than the fact that the IRA had bombed and killed our friends, our comrades, our community.
Was it more of an objection to the ceasefire?
It was an objection to sitting down with Republicans. It was an objection to sitting down with the enemy. I suppose it would be similar to the Second World War, what the Japanese done to the British in the concentration camps, and what the Germans maybe done. You know, it's very, very difficult to sit down with your enemy when a conflict is coming to an end or a conflict is over. So it's very difficult to sit down with your enemy at the best of times. But you know, eventually you have to do that in any conflict when it's coming to an end, and you have to decide whether you want to move in that direction or the other direction. Most of the 90% of the lads that I knew agreed with the Good Friday Agreement, but those that didn't disagreed with it for not because of the content, and I mean, because the content of it satisfied the prisoners, the loyalist prisoners at the time, and the content was the Union was safe, and that's what we were guaranteed. But the Good Friday Agreement was based around the belief that the two communities would get a say and a share in how this country is being run, and those were the things that were given to appease Republicans, and those were the apples that we had to bite into and say, right, okay, that's what we'll have to do. If that's what we have to do to have peace in this country, we'll do it. And that's why we went down those roads, Jimmy. Not because everything in the Good Friday Agreement was sweet and rosy. It wasn't. There's a lot of things in the Good Friday Agreement we didn't like, but there's a lot of things in the Good Friday Agreement Republicans didn't like either.
See, in terms of the content of the agreement, I think it's pretty clear. I mean, were you deceived? And if so, who deceived you? because, you know, there's certain promises made that you know, the union was safe, the principle of consent, and the principle of consent has been shown to be a chocolate fire guard, you know. But so who done?
I think the British government deceived us all. I think the British government were more interested in getting the bombs stopped in London and all the stuff that was happening around then than there were anything else. I think that the British government were just getting put under pressure by their own MPs and that they wanted the violence to stop. And like as we had said long time ago, that they, because they were bombing London, they were getting everything, and because we were British and we weren't going to have the capacity to do that sort of stuff to the British were giving republicanism everything.
Just then to go back to a wee bit more of the context of the time, and this is something that always interests me because it's quite clear, you know, post the Belfast Agreement and the ceasefires, it seems to me that I remember a loyalist ex-prisoner telling me he was in jail the time the bomb went off McClellan Road, and he says UVF, UDA, that hand, everybody mixed together, you know, the wings had mixed together, and then all of a sudden the ceasefires came, the Belfast Agreement, and there was feuds and fighting. I mean, was there more camaraderie? Were people closer together through the 70s and 80s and 90s? And do you think it's a lack of an open enemy that caused
there was a lot of feuding between loyalism over the early days of the conflict. When I was 19 years of age when I was interned. My wife Maureen was pregnant with my daughter Lisa, and the feuding that I had to go through in East Belfast here, you know.
Is this in the 70s, maybe?
Yeah, in the 70s. I was interned in 72. And the feuding is, it's hard to describe, Jimmy. It's you know, you're putting your family through all that stuff, and you have people arriving at your door with guns, pulling you out of the house, wanting to kill you. You know, all that sort of stuff there. You know, it's really, it's hard to, you know, when you go through some of that stuff, and your families came through it, it makes you want to drive more for peace, and it wants you to drive more to get away from that stuff, to have a normal life and to live a normal life. A couple of my brothers went to England. One of them went on the run and ended up staying there, and their lives are completely different the way our lives are. You know, we're on a constant we're you know, defensive all the time and worried about people coming to our door, kick our door in and stuff like that there, you know. So all those things added to wanting to move away from the violence, the murders, the bombings and all that stuff there. And it was a genuine reason to, and it wasn't selling out our people or selling out our country. It was getting our country to a place where we needed to take it. You know, we needed to stop the violence, get the violence stopped first, and hopefully try and work together to get things sorted out around the tables and that there. And we worked harder than the politicians did in the early days, because and we were got at a lot because we done that, you know, because we sat down with Republicans and we sat down to try and make our communities better for both sets of our people, you know. And people don't understand all these things, that we had got so far ahead of the politicians. It was unbelievable at one stage in this country, before Republicans decided to try and be greener than the dissidents. And that's when the flag protest came in, Jimmy. Yeah. Up to the end, we were getting some real good work done between each other to try and stop the violence, stop the.
Do you think nationalism pushed it too far? The you know, equality wasn't enough, and now it has to be supremacy and total destruction.
Yeah, well, I think actually what's happening with republicanism now is that they are going back to where they said they were, and they're trying to turn it back onto us. I remember meeting a guy, an IRA man, and came down the taxi to the mural down the back road, and his very words were to me, he says, "Jim, the boot's on your necks now." So that's the way they were thinking of, because they had the problem with the RUC and the police and the army and all that there, that because it happened to them, it has to happen to us. And I think some Republicans have got this in their head, that we have to suffer for them as to have, or they have to go against us on certain things. You know, Jamie, they keep talking about this New Ireland and if this is how we're being treated with Republicans through the City Hall at the minute, and the way things are going, and not even allowing things to happen at Stormont for the celebration of the 100 years. What sort of society would we live in if they're so-called New Ireland? You know, they're to me, they're preaching it, but they're not doing it.
Yeah.
It's good for the cameras.
Yeah. Well, tell me a bit about, obviously, you're more of a personal question. You're somebody who's obviously give your life in various ways to Loyalism from the start of the conflict. What impact has it had on your life in terms of your activism and loyalism in various different ways from the start of the conflict? I mean, how has it affected your life and that of your family, your partner?
Oh yeah, Jamie, my wife Maureen, how do I stop it? She every single time I go out the door, she says to me when I'm saying I'm going somewhere, she says I'm going to save Ulster. That's all I ever get over. And fair play to her, she's came through some stuff over the years, you know, and you know, between loyalists fighting loyalists and Republicans sending me death threats and moss cards from down the south, and being the most hated person in the Short Strand at one time. They said I was a community worker by day and a terrorist by night. And then in my own community, when I was working cross community, I was given an award for the Tenant of the Year throughout the United Kingdom, put forward by the Housing Executive. And whenever I won that award, people in my own community turned around and said, "Oh, the Short Strand residents put you up for it." So you know that's the sort of position that I was in, trying to do community work and work for the people in the community. I was chairman of the residents group, and I started the residents along with Lily Hutton, lovely woman that lives down there, and we started a residents group up down there, and for 25 years I was chairman, and we made some brilliant changes to the area, the community and the houses and all that stuff, and we made efforts to try and get the violence stopped down in the interface, and we've done some real good work there, even with Republicans as well, you know, because if I'd have been born in the Short Strand, I'd have been in the IRA. There's no question about that, you know. But I was born a loyalist, so I joined a loyalist organisation. So,
what impact did it have on you personally in your life?
Well, I'm 69 years of age. Maureen's still with me. I have 3 children. I have 7 grandchildren and 2 great grandchildren. My hope for the future for them is that they never see any of the stuff that I seen, Jimmy. And I say to all our kids, politicians are supposed to lead us. I am still waiting for them to start leading. You know, we're coming into an election here, and it's going to be one of the hardest things for our people to swallow if we end up with a First Minister that's a Republican. People who try to destroy this country and this community. But at the end of the day, we need to turn around and get unionism to unite and come together, because it's the only answer. We can't continue to live with 3, 4 political parties representing unionism. We're not as big as we were. We're not as massive as we think as a people anymore. We need to conform, and we're struggling to conform. The leaders of unionism are struggling to conform.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean conform? Conform to what?
They need to conform to understand that nearly all the ideals within the PUP, the TUV, the UUP and the DUP are near enough all the same. They're near enough all the same, Jimmy. All the ideals and the wants and needs of those 4 main political unionist parties are nearly all the same.
On the constitutional issues or some
on the
policies?
Social policies now are slightly different. There's not massive differences in their policies. Not massive difference. Nothing that couldn't bring them together to create a situation where we have a political party that we can all and serve us instead of serving themselves. They're constantly party first and country second.
And then let me ask you 2 questions because they're both interconnected. The first one is, how do you feel as somebody who, as we've went through, give your life to loyalism, when loyalism corporately is labelled as drug dealers, gangsters, thugs? And the follow-on question then, if you can answer after that, is how do you feel about when unionist parties, some of them take the approach of treating loyalism like that type of underclass and buying into those labels of gangsters and drugs? And
we've said it time and time again, Jamie, a genuine loyalist cannot be a drug dealer or a gangster, because you're not serving your people. Loyalism is about being loyal to your people, your country and your crown. That's what our loyalism means. That's what it is. So if you're into drug dealing out there, be a gangster. Go out there, work away, do what you want. You're taking your chance with the police. At the end of the day, don't put the 3 letters on your chest and pretend that you're a loyalist, because to me, you're not a loyalist. Anyone engaged in that is not a loyalist. And Jackie MacDonald and all those throughout loyalism have said that, you know. So,
do you think some of the organisations and some sections of the organisations have been unfairly demonised?
Absolutely.
For political purposes?
Jamie, we have made a statement galore with church ministers and people, and telling people. The media don't want to know about it, Jamie. The media want to vilify us and put us in a box that we're all the same. They want Jamie Bryson to be the same as Jim Wilson, the same as these people who were
I'm a bit better than Jim.
even those who have been up to their neck in drugs. And they want us all in that box. They want to paint us all the same. The media in this country have been doing that for years. I was on ITV one night, and I came out of ITV, Jimmy. And I just finished off doing something with a guy who's from Poland, who's one of their ambassadors. And we had done stuff down the bottom of Newton Ards Road with him. And I just finished the interview on the TV. And we came out, and I met a guy who was actually, I knew from years ago from school and that there. And I said to him, tell me this, why do you not do good news stories about the loyalist community? And he said, because there's a mountain of good work going on out there, positive work within our communities, real good, and ex-combatants are involved in it. He says, we don't do good news stories about loyalism.
No.
That answers it.
And do you think there's been an agenda to criminalise loyalists
and
legitimise Republicans?
Well, Jamie,
that's a
David Irvine came at the Good Friday Agreement, close to the end of it. He says, the Chief Constable will look after loyalists, and Tony Blair will look after Republicans. So the Republicans are going to be politicised, and we were going to be criminalised. But we had a brave hand in that ourselves. So we can't turn around and blame other people for that. We had a hand in ourselves. We let individuals within loyalism do the things that they've done. And you've seen it yourself. You've seen through the people who came through, who tried to destroy loyalism, who were more interested in their pockets than they were this country and the people in this country. You know, and it annoys me, Jamie, that they don't see a difference in you and me and these people. You know, but they don't want to see the difference, and that's what the annoying part is. They don't want to see the difference.
How do you think loyalism collectively, and those loyalists, because there are good loyalist ex-prisoners who are demonised and criminalised and presented in these Sunday newspapers as X, Y, and Z, and you know and I know. I mean, these people aren't doing the things.
No,
but
that's part and parcel of it, Jimmy.
How do you think that loyalism gets out from under that?
Well, I've said time and time again, doing our own stuff on our own media is probably the way, because there's very few journalists, and even the journalists that we did have who would have been friendly to us are no longer friendly. They have jumped on the bandwagon of just keep kicking loyalism, keep kicking those because they're up to their neck. You know, if they really look hard, there's a big drug empire going on in republicanism. No, massively in their communities, you know, as much as what there is in loyalist communities. But you'll not hear too much about that, Jimmy. You'll hear about the loyalists. You'll not hear too much about Republicans up to their neck in it and not there. My worry about young lads getting brought in and being used and being abused and stuff like that. There, it just appalls me that at the end of the day, you know, we're you know. At the year that we're in now, we should be smarter. We should be smarter and having somewhere to tell our own stories about the good stuff going on. Nobody wants to know, Jimmy. Yeah. Nobody wants to know.
And just as we're coming to the end, a bit up to date a wee bit now, we've talked about the Belfast Agreement and stuff. Do you think, do you worry in terms of the similar anger and loyalism that if the protocol doesn't go and if the union's not restored and the promises of the Belfast Agreement aren't restored, do you worry in terms of a new generation of militant loyalists?
Jimmy, I have to worry about it because, you know, I have grandchildren there, you know, some older than others, and ones right in the middle of the age where they could sort of say, oh, I'm going to join up or I'm going to involve in this. And the rumblings I've been hearing for the last sort of 6 months haven't been good, you know, but within the...
See, just on that, let me just ask you one question on that. See, for somebody like you, has the actions of the Irish government and the imposition of this protocol, seen as it is as a reward for violence, has that made it really difficult for you to, with any credibility, say to those young lads when you hear the rumblings, you know, hang on lads, there's a different way? I mean, have they cut the legs to them under you?
No, Jamie, that's a decision for those that look at me and say, you know, is he being honest? Is he not being honest? Is he a D-head? Or is he genuine? Well, I can tell you, I've been, since I was born, my mum was born in Sonny Road, my dad was born in Springburn in Glasgow. I was born a loyalist, you know, and I'll die a loyalist, like it or like it not. But at the end of the day, I can tell you one thing, that I would never ever try and give a wrong direction to my people and the people that I love in this community, in this country. But at the end of the day, you know, people look at you and say, you know, there's drug dealers hitting me, Jimmy. There's drug dealers in East Belfast here, despise the ground I walk on. You know, but I've said time and time again, I'm anti-drugs. People know I'm anti-drugs. You know, if they want to take it, they want to deal it. That's okay. That's a policing matter. It's up to the police to deal with it. You know, but it's a lot of that stuff has affected me over the years. My grandson, you know, get injured over stuff because I was anti-drugs and stuff like that there. So, but people don't understand. You see, people will put me into a box the same as they'll put somebody else who is maybe genuinely up their neck in drugs, you know, because they want my stature and your stature as well. To think, because you've been labelled, you've got your labels already, Jamie, as you well know. And once you get the labels, then they play on that, and people who you think are your friends use it against you, you know. Yeah. But luckily enough, I have a real smashing family behind me, Jimmy. My wife, Maureen, is tolerated and much has had to live through feuds, loyalist feuds, Republican feuds, Republicans trying to get me and stuff like that there, and she stood by me. And my kids, I have my two daughters and my son, and they've had to live through, you know, when we've had to move out and stuff like that there. So all those things have been hard, you know. They're not easy, and you know, and people probably watching this will say, oh well, there's your right and stuff like that. That's okay. I was a 16, 17-year-old young lad when this conflict started. I didn't create this conflict. I decided to do something about it and join up and do what I thought was right for my country. You know, that's okay. Crucify me if you want, but at the end of the day, I was only doing what was happening in my country at the time. And when you look at some of the stuff in Africa, the age of some of them young kids carrying AK-47s, you know, that's scary. That's scary to think that our country could fall back into something like that there. And the protocol needs to be removed completely. Not Article 16, completely. You know, I speak to people, and the last interview I done with Sky, I said, you just don't get it. You just don't get it. You think, you know, to trigger an Article 6, he says, you're giving our sovereignty, the sovereignty of our country to Europe. You're giving the Irish government more of a say in what happens in Northern Ireland, what the British government has around the economical situation here. I think it was 3 weeks ago, there was something to do with the VAT, and they couldn't bring it in here because it was part of it. I mean, the United Kingdom couldn't put legislation in their own country, part of their own country, because of the protocol. You know, so how does people see that that's right? And how do they see that that's not going to antagonise my community and get our people up in arms? Because everybody's so annoyed about it, Jimmy, but we need good leadership from our politicians. The other thing we need, and this is, people might think, we need sensible heads in the SDLP, Sinn Féin and the Alliance. When are they going to wake up, Jimmy, and start to realise that you can't have one section of this community being down while the other's happy. You need to have them all happy. That's what politics should be about, making all the people happy and do the right things. The Alliance Party have done nothing to help unionism and loyalism over the years. Very, very little that I've ever heard them supporting around our community. And it's the same with the SDLP and the Shinners. See if it's hurting us, it seems to be the SDLP and the Alliance are happy with it.
Just on a different subject before we finish, something I'm sure it'll be close to your heart, you've done a lot of work on in terms of legacy. and another one of the negotiators in the Belfast Agreement, Winston Ray, he's facing charges at the minute, while the Republicans seem not to me. I mean, and there's very little coverage or support for the likes of Winky Lane, who's being treated appallingly by the criminal justice system. I mean, of your generation of loyalists and people who were around, does the treatment of Winky and people like him cause anger and cause greater resentment towards the agreement?
Whenever Brian Irvine Dawn took over after David, and then Brian Irvine became leader of the PUP, I brought to Brian's attention that there was 82 people, right, being looked at by the HET, Historic Inquiries. 78 of them were loyalists. Four of them were Republicans, and they weren't mainstream Republicans, they were dissident Republicans. So you had 82 or 84 cases going through the system, and not one of them was provisional IRA. Now, what does that tell you about whenever I said to you about the Good Friday Agreement and the way it's been played out and manipulated out? You know, it's it's behind the scenes. It's all the big people in the police and the intelligence service. They decide all these things. They decide these things. So keep making us the bad guys, and keep looking historically into what loyalists done about the collusion, because that's the big thing now about the collusion with loyalists. The collusion with the collusion there was between the Irish government and the IRA. The collusion between them, the Garda setting up senior police officers and that there. That's all the same, and that's why I said early. Davey described it a dirty, stinking war. It was, but we need to put it behind us. You know, we're going to move forward, and this country's going to be decent for all of us to live in. We all need to turn around and get the past behind us.
Would you do anything different?
Jimmy, that's I probably, I'm not sure. I was born into an area where I had 5 brothers and 3 sisters, 9 of us and my mum and dad, in a 2-bedroom house, an outside toilet, and no different than Catholics and the short strand and that there. And I remember a senior Republican saying to me one day about the conflict, and I said, but you've got it wrong. You know, there was, in the street that I lived in off the Woodstock Road, there was at least 20 families, 20 Catholic families. We played with all them lads, and the collective bonfire would be us. We got on brilliant with them. They were Catholics. 11th of July, B&B, something like that there. But it was funny. It wasn't, we were kids, we didn't know what it meant to each other. But society was getting on all right. People were mixing. Catholics were feeling safe in Protestant areas. Protestants were feeling safe in Catholic areas. And then it was all blew out of the water. And it was blew out of the water by Republicans, because their agenda was they thought they could fight another war and take us into United Ireland violently. You know, and I remember, I think one of the most iconic moments for me was when Gerry Adams was confronted in the Falls Road by an old Republican. And when they had agreed to the Good Friday Agreement, he turned around and he says, all this to be up and storm out there, and all those lives lost for what?
No.
And you have to ask yourself, question for what? And I watched a Republican on that I knew, I'm not going to mention his name, and I watched a Republican doing an interview on TV one time. It wasn't TV, it was a programme that was done, a documentary. And he sat there and he said, what was it all about? And he started crying. And that's what I feel, Jimmy. What was it all about? We were put to a conflict by the Republican movement for what? Because I believe where we are today, probably not Sinn Féin in the sense, but where we are today with all the civil rights and all the equal rights and all those things that have went through, would have all changed without a bullet being fired.
Do you think loyalists had the right to defend themselves?
Absolutely, absolutely. I stand over the fact that my community was being butchered and bombed, and when we started the barricades and the vigilante stuff, because I remember my dad and all doing it, and all the men around the areas doing the vigilante stuff. It was fearful times, Jamie, and people, you know, when you asked me earlier questions about the Good Friday Agreement, when you came through all that, when you come to where you have a chance to escape from it, you need to take that chance to escape from it. And I think that's why so many loyalists and so many people went for the Good Friday Agreement. It wasn't the love of Irish republicanism and loyalism sort of coming together. It was the love of maybe getting a decent life for our kids and stopping the killings, stopping the murders, you know, and basically
if the agreement was put before you without the spectre of violence in the background, would you have viewed it differently? I mean, was the sole basis of you supporting the agreement basically, look, let's give peace a chance, but without actually being deceived, you know, as we've already discussed on the content. But
Jimmy, and I honestly, you know, I wouldn't sell my loyalism for anything in the world, but I don't think one life is worth taking for republicanism or loyalism. I don't believe it. I believe, you know, what I've came through and what I've seen, I believe that we need to be smarter. Loyalists need to be smart. Unionism needs to be smarter. Look how smart we've been in the last sort of 5 or 6 years within unionism. You know, where's the leadership? Why are we in this position? You know, we need to ask ourselves those sort of questions. You know, why are we where we are? And, you know, I'm a loyalist, and I'm so down about what's happened to my country and what's happening to my country. And you know, you have Boris Johnson coming over and promising you, the leader of your, you know, the whole country, the United Kingdom, telling us that we're safe, there's no problem over my dead body and all this. What's he do? Lied completely to us and went away and done the exact opposite. So you can't put the cattle on for that, Jimmy. You know, you can't turn around and say, he's going to turn and do that. You just, because you're relying on leadership to be honest and genuine and to lead you in where you need to go, and we've been led poorly.
You've dedicated your life to loyalism. You worked for peace on the basis that the union was safe. You've carried, I'm sure, many coffins of your friends down the road.
Yes, I have, yeah.
Seen friends in jail, spent time in jail yourself. How does it make you feel now that the union's not safe and the union has been basically ripped away from us?
Scary, Jimmy, and what's scary about it? It's not scary for me. It's scary for my kids, my friends, their children. It's scary for our children, Jamie. And where the scary part is that it doesn't take much. I know it doesn't take much to start a conflict up again. You know, and that's my fear. My fear is that some of our kids will get roped in to this, and then there could end up being another conflict out of it all. And the last thing we need as a people and as a community is conflict. You know, we need to find a way out of this. We need to be able to put the pressure on the politicians.
Is that where we're heading if the protocol doesn't go with a new generation?
Jimmy, I don't know, but I'm fearful of it. And the reason I'm fearful of it, and that's why I don't know whether the SDLP, the Alliance, or the Shinners would see this, but I would appeal to them to think about my community, because you could be driving my community back to civil conflict, and that's an absolute last thing I think you want, or I would want, is that our community get into conflict again. Yeah. Because it's, when you've went through it and you've seen it and you've been there and you've seen the pain on families on both sides of our community and what they've had to go through, nobody in their right senses would want to go back there. You know, it's like visiting Armageddon and saying, oh, we'll go back to that. You know, we've had it, we don't want it. But you need to, you know, politicians need to be smart and intelligent about what's going on here. Yeah. You know, and especially politicians in this country.
Have you a final message you want to send to the loyalist community or anybody else or anything else?
Yes, lads, be patient. Let's see what our politicians can do. The LCC have sent out constant messages of hope that the politicians can deal with us and the politicians can sort this out. Let's hope that the politicians and even the politicians on the opposite side of us can see and might turn around and use whatever influence they have to help this. It's not always about kicking the people you think your enemy. You can also put the hand of friendship out and try and help. And because the union's community is going through a bad phase at the minute, and it's not a nice place to be. I see, as a loyalist and unionist now, I feel so dejected about what's happening to my country. I feel so annoyed that other people don't see it the way we see it, Jimmy. You know, and I have put myself in Republican shoes whenever the conflict had finished, and I put myself in their shoes at times, and then I tried to analyse out and say, You know, how would I feel if I was in their position or in my position? So I think the political people need to start thinking about how the unionist people and our loyalist people feel about what's going on here.
Is it being made difficult for you and people like you on the LCC who have worked hard to keep a lid on the protocol stuff, who have kept the organisations on a trajectory throughout the last 25 years? There's been no dissident loyalists. Is it being made? Is the job of people like you and people around you being made difficult by the fact that loyalism being pushed so far into a corner that you know, from the bottom up?
There's no doubt that, you know, there's rumblings out there that people want to go down different roads, and I mean, but within the LCC we've been constantly trying to tell people, you know, let the politicians deal with it, let the politicians deal with it, you know, and violence is not the answer. You know, we need to be coming from that perspective and change the mindset that because Republicans go out and threaten this and threaten that and they get their own way, well, that's not the way to do it. You know, that's what I said earlier on. How do you bring a society up, your kids up, and they see that and they say, well, if they get that through threat of violence, we'll do that. We need to look at it differently. We definitely do, Jimmy. And I'm a bit worried about where it's going. But I think you and others have let a pressure valve release in the protests. At least the protests are going, and there's, you know, I haven't heard of violence at any of them, Jimmy, to tell you the truth. And the flag protests and stuff was slightly different when there was violence. Now these protests are in their own areas, and that's right. That's letting people know our anger, you know. So people need to get that message. You know, a lot of journalists are playing it off. Actually, it's 500 people on the street or 50 people on the street. That's 50 people who's really concerned about what's happening in this country. They're going to come out and give their time to do that. Well, that's 500,000. You know, those people are concerned about something. Of course it is. Of course it is. So it has to, you know. And I don't like doing political stuff coming up the election, but I was so surprised that a fellow unionist would turn around and as the protests were not violent, right, and there's no violence emanating from them, I was very disappointed that our politicians were deciding to pull away and not to support it. And that to me shows weakness. It shows weakness within them more than anything. And you know, I have a lot of time for the leaders, even though I don't think the leaderships we have is great, because we're not in a good place, you know. I think we all know we're not in a good place.
Sorry, so just finally, Jim, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I'm just, I hope that if anyone sees this or anybody watches it, that they take into it that I've came through the violence, like a lot of guys and a lot of friends of mine, and that I don't want to see the violence in the streets of this country anymore again, because it only brings heartache and pain to those that end up in the receiving end of it.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for your time and sharing your experience with it. Appreciate it. Thank you.